Well, it's finally stopped raining enough for me to get out into the garden to plant my potatoes. Sometimes it's not a question of waiting till frost dates, but for the sun to shine a little bit and for the rains to abate enough to get out into the garden and to work the soil. Our last frost date has been easily a month ago. But here in mid-April, we're still in good stead for planting potatoes. Our season out here in the islands is long, but cool. So I choose to plant mid-season potatoes, generally all at the same time, if we're to have any kind of crop at all. This year I've got several varieties of potatoes. I do have an early to mid-season, several mid-season, and a mid to late season variety. All basically specialty potatoes, only one of which is really any kind of a storage potato. I don't have a lot of room here in the garden to be planting potatoes, but I do like to try and grow as many as the plot will yield. This year I've got 5 varieties I'm going to be planting. They all tend to seem to be a red variety of one sort or other, either red skin and white or yellow fleshed, or red skin and red fleshed, which is always interesting to make a potato salad with. I've got huckleberry, which is an early to mid-season potato. I've got red gold, mountain rose, and Corolla, all of which are mid-season potatoes. The Corolla is a storage potato and keeps quite well throughout the year. And finally, I've got some French fingerling potatoes, which are a delicacy. They're probably the longest growing potato that I have here. In other words, they take 90 to 100 days to maturity. They're still a mid-season potato, but I'd place those as mid to late season. Now, because it is mid-April, I'm going to plant them all at the same time. I've already been out here a week ago preparing the plot for the potatoes, raking it and leveling it and getting it set. Meanwhile, the potatoes have been in a sunny window, chitting. In other words, I've let the potatoes start to sprout a little bit. And by putting them in a sunny window with the seed eyes up in egg cartons, it gives them a head start at a time when, hey, it was raining anyway, I couldn't be out planting them, and I'd already purchased them. I'm not sure what kind of difference it makes, and there's arguments for and against it, but I figure if it does do any good at all, you might as well do it. It doesn't take any extra effort. I've been doing it for a number of years. Now, while cropping varies, I have a feeling that has more to do with where in the garden I've put the potatoes rather than anything else. Where I plan to put the potatoes this year, I haven't actually had any potatoes for around 3 years, and that's ideal to rotate the potatoes back into this plot this year. Typically, you want to have at least 2 years between any kind of nightshade plant, tomatoes, eggplants, potatoes, anywhere where you're going to plant them in your garden. Last time, as I recall, when I had the potatoes here, they yielded quite well. This end of the garden tends to have a very loose, light soil, tends to be very deep, and is exactly the right sort of soil the potatoes love. Last year where I had them, I put them in a place that had a little bit more clay. I didn't get such a great crop, but they did help break up the soil quite a bit, and that's where I've planted the peas this year. Well, enough chit-chat. Let's get to planting some potatoes. There's a great many theories and practices as to what's the best way to plant potatoes. My personal preference is for the easiest way possible. Digging up a garden can be back-breaking work, and there's no point in making it harder for yourself. I've tried all 3 of the major methods, trenching, mulching, and digging, and they all seem to work about the same. So why not just do it the simplest? To that end, rather than using a shovel, this year I'm going to use a dibber. Now, this antiquated piece of farm equipment I think used to be used to turn off water valves underground. But with this end on it, I think it'll make a perfect dibber to make a potato-shaped hole in the soil. The only other thing I'm going to use is just a straight piece of copper pipe that I had lying around, and that's just as a guide to get straight rows. The only other thing I really need is my foot. Now to start with, I'm going to use my piece of pipe or any straight edge and just lay it out so I can get a straight row. This bit of the garden's a little bit tapered, so I want to work them in here till they're parallel with the rest of the rows I put in. Next, I'm going to start off by using the dibber just to make a hole in the ground. About 6 to 8 inches deep, and then I can pop in a spud. I'm going to start off with the fingerling potatoes because they take the longest to grow, and at this edge of the garden I'll be harvesting them the last. The very earliest potatoes I put in, I'll put at the opposite inner edge of the garden, so that once I pull those, hopefully in early July, I'll be able to plant something else where they were. You want to put the potato in, eyes pointing up, down the depth of the hole. My personal preference is to put all the potatoes in and then go back and cover them up later. Now, I said before I was going to use my foot. Well, that's the perfect measuring tool for this sort of thing. For a small garden like mine, I like to keep things a little bit closer than you would on a much larger all potato patch. So to that end, I'm just going to plant the spuds 1 welly width apart. Put a bit of a rock there. And I'm going to put the rows 2 welly widths apart. And that should give me plenty of good spacing. Find them up there. Now, along with the question of to chit or not, there's also the question of how many chitted sprouts do you leave? One argument is that you leave the best 3, which in this case would be this one, and one of these remaining sprouts, and you'd break off the other 3. The theory being that the 3 biggest ones will be the ones that you want to feed the most energy to. I've done it before, and there have been no noticeable results to sway me one way or the other. So my preference this year is to leave all of them. Another issue about potato sprouts is whether to cut the potato up or not. Now, most years, because I have such a small plot and such harsh soil conditions, I tend to use the whole potato and all the eyes in each hole, so that the idea being the most nutrients from the potato to feed the eyes will grow the best sprouts. However, on a big spud like this, it can be common practice to slice it up. Now, determining where to slice it on a potato like this could be somewhat difficult. I'm thinking I'm going to cut it in half lengthwise. The idea being that there should be at least a couple sprouts in each piece. I could cut this conceivably this way, leaving a sprout here, and keep these sprouts if I wanted to get 2 more potatoes. I think I'll try it on this one. Now I have 3 pieces that'll grow potato plants instead of just 1. This happens to be a corolla. You can see that yellow flesh. Now that I've cut this potato, I can plant each of these parts and they'll give me an entirely individual plant. I've even heard of people going so far in hard times as to peeling the potato, saving the peels with the eyes and planting them, and eating the potato inside. Times aren't that hard yet, but I'll squirrel that thought away for another time. Meanwhile, back to planting. Well, I've got them all in the ground. The only thing that remains to be done is to go back and fill in the holes and give everything a good, thorough drink. Nice glug of water on top of each spot. Then it's a matter of waiting until the plants are about 4 to 6 inches tall. In the meantime, I've marked the rows with some stakes so it's easier to cultivate in between. Make sure to keep the weeds down as much as possible. And as soon as the plants are up 4 to 6 inches, I'll start to hill the soil up around the plants from each side, drawing soil in from the paths in between. And I like to do a combination of hilling with soil and mulching with straw. So I'll probably put 2 or 3 bales of straw over this section of ground before it's harvest season. That's it for now. Take care of yourselves and keep on growing. Bye now.